There is no doubt there's an arms race going on in the Eastern Conference. The King has moved west, and now everybody feels like they have a shot to come out of the East. And there's no doubt that the top three teams, yeah, I said three, not four, have definitely bolstered their roster. But once again, styles make fights. One of these teams may be better than the next, but not necessarily match up as well with the defending champion Golden State Warriors. So let's dive into ranking the greatest threat to the throne. Let's take a look at first who sits atop the Eastern Conference as we speak right now, and that's the Milwaukee Bucks, the surprising Milwaukee Bucks. Bringing in Mike Budenholzer, spacing out the floor, and Yanis Antetokounmpo entering his prime all factor into why Milwaukee has become a dominant presence in the Eastern Conference. Now, the trade that they made may not have got all the hype or the headlines, but it may very well be the most important trade that was made at the deadline, and that was acquiring Nikola Mirotic from the New Orleans Pelicans. Why is that so important? Fit. He absolutely fits their system. When Budenholzer came in, he changed to the space and pace system. He spaced the floor, opening things up for the Greek Freak. And no better example than that is Broy Lopez, shooting threes at an alarming rate and redefining what centers do on the floor offensively. They now get another player that does the same thing and maybe shoots the ball more prolifically. Let's take a look at how these rosters actually do match up. Those of you that have been paying attention realize Milwaukee, for several years, has given the Warriors some trouble with their length, aggression, and ability to shoot the ball. Now, I think the key matchup that everybody looks at is KD and Yanis, but that's not really going to be the case on the court. While KD, I think, may want to guard Yanis and may at times, I think they're going to cross match, and particularly from Milwaukee's side. They're not going to ask Yanis to guard KD and then carry so much of the load offensively. So I expect them to actually use him on Draymond and allow him to free roam, kind of Draymonning Draymond. The biggest question I think will be, is Golden State going to play Yanis straight up? They're going to use Draymond Green on him for the majority of the time. Are they going to let Yanis get his, or are they going to force the ball out of his hands and dare Milwaukee's shooters to beat them? I think the answer to that would be yes and no. We all know any great offensive player, you can't show them the same look over and over again. So I would expect the Warriors' strategy to remain dynamic and give him different looks. And to ask that question, is Yanis a great offensive player? I think so. While he doesn't have a variety of ways to get it done, the one way that he gets it done is impossible to stop. You combine that with the shooters they have now surrounded him with, and it's a predicament of knowing what they do, but still not being able to stop it. Perhaps Steve Kerr and the Warriors staff would take it a LeBron-type approach to Yanis. Play him straight up one-on-one, allow him to finish at the basket, and allow him to attack and attack and attack, but hope in a 7-game series he doesn't have the gas tank to finish the job. Now, that's kind of the big picture take on this matchup. Let's talk a little bit about some of the matchups within this. Eric Bledsoe plays Steph Curry very well traditionally. His combination of strength and quickness, it's tend to bother Steph in the past. Middleton, I think, will guard Durant for most of the series, or at least start on him, and he's got good length, but no one's shutting down Durant, but can they make him less efficient? That is probably the matchup Golden State chooses to attack first. I think the big problem as the Warriors roster stands right now is Broy Lopez. And I would suspect him to maybe play Boogie off the floor. You see, he's pulling 30-foot threes and stretching the floor, and I just don't think Cousins will be comfortable enough to play that far out on the perimeter. So I circle that as an X-factor matchup. And now you combine that with the fact that they can go to Mirotic and essentially do the same thing. The center position could be where Milwaukee's greatest advantage lies in this matchup. The Warriors counter, like it has been since this run has began, go small, go to the death lineup. And so there could be a clashing of wills between the coaches and strategies. Does Bud stay big with the traditional five, or does he get suckered into playing small ball with the Warriors? The question's not that easy because when you have Yanis who can play five and alter that small lineup, it's not like they're bad at playing small ball, but that's when you have to ask, what does your opponent want you to do? With a top five player in the game, great chemistry, and a system that fits most of their players, there's no doubt the Bucks are a threat. In order for the Bucks to win, though, it really is dependent on their three-point shooters. Giannis is going to do what he does, and as I mentioned before, the strategy will remain dynamic. You can expect Draymond and company to make things difficult for him. How much gas will he have in the tank by the time the finals come around? That's remained to be seen. He is in the prime of his career. But if Lopez, Brogdon, Middleton, if all these guys shoot prolifically from the three-point line, the Milwaukee Bucks can win the NBA championship. Giannis will cap off an MVP season with the finals MVP. From Golden State's side of things, as I had mentioned before, Bledsoe tends to guard Steph very well as Brogdon. Their guards are physical, and they fight over and through screens well. So I think it's Klay and KD that need to have big offensive outputs throughout the series. And it goes without saying that the role players have to compete and knock threes down to match what Milwaukee can do. But let me throw this out there for you. If the Golden State Warriors beat the Bucks, what if Draymond Green is the finals MVP? Now hear me out before you go scoffing. If the Warriors win, that means Draymond did some sort of serviceable job on Giannis Antetokounmpo, made him less efficient, frustrated him perhaps, and he's going to have the bulk of the responsibility of dealing with him. We've seen in the past, before you think this is too crazy, we've seen Draymond take Anthony Davis out of a series. In fact, several series. Now, he gets his numbers, but when push comes to shove, Draymond, you could argue, really got the better of him and was able to negate his effectiveness. So is it that crazy to say that he couldn't do the same thing to a young Giannis Antetokounmpo in his first NBA Finals appearance, win Finals MVP, and therefore allowing the Warriors to three-peat? There's still plenty of regular season to be played, and the buyout market needs to be played. Will Golden State address the depth at the center position on the buyout market? That needs to be considered. Now, Milwaukee, considering their chemistry and the way they're flowing, I feel like they may be the most likely finals opponent. But are they the biggest threat once they get there? It's so hard to say hypothetically at this point, but I will throw this out there. They could also have home court advantage the way they're winning. But I would expect Golden State to steal game one in Milwaukee because of the lack of experience that the Bucks have. Do they have a player that's ever experienced an NBA Finals? So the pressure for those first two games at home could actually backfire and work against them. I rank Milwaukee as the second greatest threat to the Warriors' throne. A proven superstar, depth, a ruckus home court, that's a recipe for championships. The Toronto Raptors have to like their chances headed towards the playoffs. But hell, they've liked their chances every year headed towards the playoffs. What has changed this year? Well, obviously, this is a new-look Toronto Raptors team, and this is not the same old Raptors. If we were to get this finals matchup, unlike the matchup with the Bucks and Giannis, I think we would get to see KD and Kawhi go toe-to-toe for much of this series. Very much so like we saw in that epic matchup in late November. But for that same reason, that's why this series would very much become about Steph Curry. I know it's cliche to say Kawhi and KD would cancel each other out, but Kawhi and KD would cancel each other out. Don't get me wrong. Things change, dynamics, they're both going to have an impact on the game, but I think they're going to have their hands full with each other and have very similar production throughout the series. Now, Golden State will throw different guys at Kawhi, just like Toronto will throw different guys at KD, but when push comes to shove, I expect them to match up mano a mano. The headlining trade they just made to acquire Marc Gasol is still a headliner name, right? He still has All-Star attached to his name. But the reality of the situation is, how much better at this point is he than Valanciunas? What he brings to the table that Valanciunas didn't is being able to initiate and run the offense through him at the high post. One of the best big men passers in the game today. He's just more diverse and versatile with his offensive skill set. He gives them another way to play and attack. But once again, styles make fights, and I'm just not so sure how much of an impact he would have on this potential finals matchup. We've seen Nick Nurse willing to be very dynamic with his rotations and matchups. I think Marc was more acquired for the road to the finals, and in particular, a matchup with Joel Embiid. But I'd also be remiss to not mention Boogie. As long as Boogie would be on the floor, Marc could be on the floor. Speaking of Nick Nurse, though, and their depth and versatility, the theme of inexperience creeps into this roster as well. Yes, they've got Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, but they're also very reliant on Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, and a first-year head coach in Nick Nurse. And the very thing that's their strength, their depth, and their versatility could also end up shooting them in the foot. Because they have so many options, will Nurse choose the right option? Will they get out of pocket with their style of play? Ultimately, I go back to the guard matchup of Steph Curry and Kyle Lowry. And I think whoever wins that matchup wins this series. The recent pickup of Jeremy Lin was a great insurance policy on the often injured Kyle Lowry. I guess I look at the Raptors this way. They're the safest play. If this finals matchup were to occur, there's no doubt that we'd be in for a series. But them actually winning the series, I think their ceiling is ultimately lower than some of these other contenders. Therefore, I rank them third when it comes to being a threat to the throne. Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. There's a lot of talk that this starting five is just as good as the Warriors starting five. Not so fast. Chemistry does matter last time I checked. Nonetheless, this is very impressive. Elton Brand and the 76ers have pushed all their chips into the table, making move after move and acquiring more star power to go along with a little more depth. From Golden State's perspective, the biggest question is, what in the world do you do with Joel Embiid? And again, I go back to the buyout market. Will there be another center on this roster? You go back a few weeks ago when Philadelphia was at Oracle Arena. When DeMarcus Cousins was out of the game, Embiid just simply did what he wants. Now, you can assume that DeMarcus will continue to get in better shape and be able to play heavier minutes. But you consider the fact that Philadelphia, and now with Toronto adding Marc Gasol, Milwaukee adding Mirotic, all these teams now with centers and center depth, I have to assume the final roster spot for the Warriors will be a center. From Philadelphia's perspective, I think the question is going to be, what do we do with Ben Simmons? Now, in this, again, hypothetical matchup, at this point, you would assume that they would have figured some things out on their road to the finals because the strategy will be employed from day one from their playoff opponents. Ben Simmons and his lack of gravity, if you will, is going to allow, I don't care if you have four other shooters on the floor, it's still going to suck in the paint. But Ben, well, he's kind of got to play. So I think that's the predicament Brett Brown will find himself in. And perhaps he'll take Ben off the floor with championship stakes on the line. But then you're taking away the guy that can not only guard Steph Curry, but could guard Kevin Durant at the same time and is obviously their offense initiator. I can tell you right now, Golden State will put Draymond Green on Ben Simmons and allow him to roam and play free safety and show why he's perhaps the greatest help defender the league's seen. I would assume the counter to that from Philadelphia's view would be to post up the bigger Ben Simmons on Draymond and play four out and let Ben operate and initiate the offense from the post. The problem with that is now you're just relegating Joel Embiid to being a stretch five where he's much less efficient and less dominant. To bring it back big picture, I think this is a matchup where you can look and say Philadelphia will win the front court matchup. Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons is a point forward, right? Their amount of wings and forwards is just superior. So where does the Warriors' advantage lie? In the backcourt with the Splash Brothers. I just got done talking about their depth at the forward spot, their length and their size, right? The one area that may make them vulnerable in particular against the Warriors is chasing Steph and Clay through screens. The amount of ground they cover, the relentless movement of the Splash Brothers is where I see the Warriors getting off offensively the most. We have to also talk about chemistry and fit. And that's one where you look at Milwaukee and it's just all clicking. And it's great that Elton Brand has made all these moves, but the fact is, how many games will this starting five and this roster have under their belt? Not very many. And when things get tough, chemistry matters. When mistakes are made, chemistry matters. And so that's a significant advantage to the champs when looking at a roster that was just put together. How will the Sixers respond when they are down, when they do blow a lead? That's remained to be seen. I kind of look at them the opposite of Toronto. Toronto, as I said, was the safe play. You're guaranteed a good series. With Philadelphia, what if Jimmy Butler decides to start playing hero ball in his contract year? Embiid's back flares up. Or Ben just refuses to shoot and he's being gapped by 15 feet. It could be a quick series. But if they do find chemistry, they do stay healthy, and everybody buys in, there's no doubt they're the greatest threat to the throne. Wait a minute. You're not even going to mention the Boston Celtics, the team that the Warriors themselves claimed to be the greatest threat to their three-peat? To me, right now, in my eyes, and I've mentioned this many times, the chemistry is off. And this is no secret. Celtics fans, you have to acknowledge this. Now, could Gordon Hayward all of a sudden find his confidence, find his body? Could Kyrie Irving all of a sudden shut up and just play basketball? Yeah, it could happen, right? And potentially, yeah, their ceiling is right there alongside Philadelphia. And remember this, before you go pointing out the Celtics own the Sixers, that's true. But I'm talking about matchups for the Warriors in the finals. The Celtics may be a better team than the Sixers. Their style may match better against the Sixers. But for the Warriors, Joel Embiid, the size of the Sixers, to me, they're the tougher matchup. And I also strongly believe that as long as Kyrie Irving suits up for the Celtics this year, he's the poison pill. He's the kryptonite to their young players. And because of their chemistry being off, Gordon Hayward still trying to find himself, this is just not their year. Now, I know some of you Western Conference fans are probably thinking, what about my Nuggets? What about the Thunder? Paul George, MVP. Houston reloading. I will have a version 2 of this talking about the threats in the West shortly. If you enjoyed this video, you like unique, real, thought-provoking content on basketball, please consider subscribing to the channel. I'm out, y'all.
I've been winning so long, it's like alchemy.